So I have my phone with me here today because I can see all of my slides, and it's just going to help me the slides that you're seeing. So it says Jaime Koebel, but I got married almost 1 year ago, and the 23rd is my 1 year anniversary, and I'm actually Jamie Morse. But that's okay, because a lot of people know me as an artist by Jaime Koebel. So how I'm going to present, hey, there's lots of nice, happy faces that I recognize here in the audience. I just want to say thanks for coming. This is my first time being with Creative Mornings. And how I'm going to go through the presentation to talk about tradition is showing a lot of my artwork and then talking about some of the connections to some current events or issues and how all of the different forms of art that I do are related to that. So yeah, we can go on to the next slide. See? Jaime Morse. So I'm from a place called Lac La Biche, Alberta. It's kind of pixelated, but this is sort of the lay of the land. This is where I come from. That's the lake, Lac La Biche. And that's pretty much the whole town. There's 3,000 people. It's fairly multicultural. There's First Nations, Matey. There's a Ukrainian community. There's an Italian community, French community, Plamondon. And there's a white Russian community, a huge Lebanese community. And this is all like 3 hours northeast of Edmonton. So there's these very diverse communities in a very small area, only 3,000 people. When everybody comes together, the town swells to about 6,000. But even though there's a pretty diverse community, it can be pretty much in silos. So I'll go to the next slide. This is my cute little grandma. She's German. She's from Nidopin in Germany. And she moved to Canada when she was 12 years old. And if you go on to the next slide, this is where Lac La Biche is on the map. So this is just to give you some context where I'm from. So even though it looks like it's central, it's actually northern Alberta. So that's about a 3-hour drive from Edmonton to Lac La Biche. You can go on to the next slide. That's me. Do I look like Baby B? Baby B is my son, Blaze. He's somewhere around. He's sporting a nice little, there he is back there. He's sporting a nice little vest, and he's nice and content and quiet in Ember's arms. And he's there to be my model today for some of the artwork that I've done. Next slide. This is me and my family. Very different, right? So as I was saying, my grandma's German, my mom's German. I grew up in a German household with a German stepdad in a predominantly Aboriginal town. And my upbringing was a little bit different. So these are my brother and sister that I grew up with, and their biological dad is also German. So next slide. This is my mom. Next slide. This is the farm that I grew up in. So my grandma came to Canada. She moved to this little farm in a place called Cragen. And she was really well liked. Partly she was a bootlegger for a while, so she had a lot of friends. She was in between a Métis community and a First Nations community, and she was asked a lot to come into the communities, and she was probably one of the only white women who was asked to come and spend some time in the sweat lodge ceremonies and some of their Métis ceremonies. And here I was the only Native child in the whole family up to this point. In fact, my birth certificate to this day says father unknown, because my grandma and my mom thought it would be safer for me to not have an Aboriginal father listed on my birth certificate. But I came out looking pretty brown, and so they couldn't get away from that. And it's shaped my identity. It's shaped who I am. It's shaped how I celebrate and have traditions today. Why am I identifying more with Indigenous traditions and ceremony than, let's say, German? So the next slide shows what the house looks like now. That's in October, the last time I went there. So I was really sad to see it down, because I have a lot of memories of being on the farm. And one of our German traditions that we celebrate is that we open all our Christmas presents on Christmas Eve. Okay, so that's cool for my kids. They like that. So now I'm about to introduce you to my Métis side. These are the 8 Métis settlements in Alberta. So there's one way up northern Paddle Prairie, Peavine, Gift Lake, East Prairie, Buffalo Lake, Keegan, Elizabeth, and Fishing Lake Métis settlement. And they're recognized by the province of Alberta, so they have that great relationship with the province. Recently, their provincial organization signed an agreement with the Crown, so there's going to be some interesting developments happening there. But Buffalo Lake Métis Settlement is where my dad lives right now. And that's where our territory is. That's our land. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see my grandma. And she was a really strong woman. She's standing inside her fishing boat. She was a fisherwoman beside her husband, who was French-Canadian. The next slide shows you a picture of my dad. And this is like typical Métis man. Mustache, the Métis man belly happening there. And, and so that's my brother Doyle. Okay, you can laugh at this. This is my dad Randy and his brother Andy. For real. You can't make this up. So I never grew up with my dad. I met him when I was about 5 years old. And I started to see them around town. So this is Lac La Biche. I grew up in the same town as them. But my dad is a residential school survivor. My dad is also a 60s scoop survivor. He was scooped up in 1969 when my grandma that you saw on the last slide, my grandma was murdered at the age of 36. Once she left her abusive husband, moved to the city, she was one of the first people in her whole family to leave. And it was within months that she was murdered. So after that, that's when all of the 7 children were split up and they were put into foster care. So the next slide shows you, this is a little video. I don't know if you can play it up there, but this is a little video of going home. This is on Beaver Lake First Nation, and this is part of where my dad has agreements with the local First Nation as a Métis guy to fish. So again, this is northern Alberta. I just wanted to show you like a little lay of the land. This is in October, and this is me and my sons. I have two sons, but it's like I have a son and a baby. And I have 2 daughters who are 17, and my son's 15, and of course Blaze is almost 6 months. So this is backing up into the water there, and so that's the beginning of our lake. If you go into the next slide, you'll see. You can play this clip too, and so this is what we do to set the net. So I'm setting you up for this is where I grew. This is like kind of the area where I grew up. So press play, and you'll be able to see what it takes to get this lovely piece of art that you see on the table. So I'm showing you this process. This is our tradition of fishing. This is our way of life. This is how my dad survives. If you go into the next slide, you can press play here. That's my son. So I took him out of school, and he's going in slow motion because it's dramatic. And he's getting out of the boat, and he's just showing you that he wasn't having a great time in school. And so I worked with his teachers to say, look, it's not working for him. Can I bring him home, and can he do assignments based on fishing? And so we had this really great experience where he got to learn how to make nets, set nets, be able to learn how to get fish, learn how to approach and talk to elders and be patient and have our traditional foods. And so all of this became valuable. You know, it was valuable before, but it gave it some solidification, I guess, in terms of value when his school said, yes, you can go home and miss a week of school and do assignments based on this land-based learning. So the next slide, this is our sort of territory. So my dad has to keep these maps in his house, and it kind of is a way to teach my son too. You know, this was great for his geography class, so he can, bring in things that are relevant to him. The next slide I really like. This is a catch, and I want you to look really closely at the scales so you could see the rigidness. And part of the traditional knowledge imparted upon myself and my son when we left is talking about the times of year, the fish are spawning. Like this is a spawning fish looks like based on its fish scales. My dad can tell the health of a fish based on its fish scales. My dad can tell a lot about their patterns and just the health of the whole ecosystems by looking at fish scales. The next slide is my dad. If you press play, this is what it takes to get an entire I have a couple of jars like this full of fish scales. Okay, so it comes from the water. We have to travel. Don't forget the travel part where I got on a plane, packed up my baby, and flew 4.5 hours and drove 3 hours, to get there, rent a car, all that stuff. So he can do this. He did like 17 fish in like 30 minutes, which is really phenomenal. And given my dad's background and how he, because of the institutions that he kept finding himself in, he found himself in a school institution, residential schools. He found himself in the provincial child care welfare system institution. And then, the next step for him was to find himself in the jail system, another institution. He spent probably a good combination of about 15 years of his life in and out of prison. The last stint was earlier this year. Addictions are a part of his story, and the last time he had a drink was when baby B was born. So that was really awesome. So we decided to go and see him. And these are the values. And this is, how valuable my dad's knowledge is. This is what the scales look like. This is what dyed fish scales look like. This is my Uncle Randy. And here he's talking to me. You can see at his hands, he's got different colors of porcupine hair and porcupine quills and fish scales. And he's telling me about the dyeing process. And then the next one is constructing a fish scale art piece. The next one is what a fish scale art piece looks like. So all of this feeds my family. Feeds my family in more ways than one, because we go out on the land and we actually can eat the fish. But then I can feeds our culture. We're practicing. It feeds my bank account because people buy the artwork. It feeds my satisfaction, as a parent, that I can pass on knowledge. So based on this one tradition, this is something that gives me and my family great pride. The next one is up here, so we brought it in person, so you can see. My husband lovingly left last night at 9 o'clock because he forgot it in his office to pick it up. So it's here, you better look at it. Just kidding. And so he did a lot of work to get it. And this is caribou hair. Because of global warming, climate change, we now have a lot of caribou in our area, which we didn't have before. So we now adapt to whatever materials are in our area. This is caribou hair. This is the fish scales, and a porcupine quill right in the center. So the next slide is how I give back to my community. So when the Fort McMurray fires came around, they had tons of volunteers who helped sort clothes, who helped open up the doors to community centers where people can sleep. But I wondered what was there for Indigenous people coming from Northern Reserves, coming from Matey settlements, available to just ease their mind once the shock was kind of hit and over, because they were there for weeks, and some people are still without a home. I really wanted to put some clips of Aboriginal people that I interviewed when I was there, and I posted them on Facebook because we weren't seeing them in the media. And we weren't seeing that their homes burnt too. We weren't seeing that they had to flee, that they had smoke inhalation. And so I went myself and I captured the voices of Indigenous people and made sure that there was a way that we could just kind of chill and practice. These are also from fish. Anybody have an idea what this might be? Fish, they're beads, but they're fish vertebrae, right? So we have a value of using every single part of the animal once we get it. Nothing goes to waste. Okay, the next one is porcupine quills dyed. Okay, the next one, this is what I'm going to explain to you. This is going to become, should you choose to accept a pledge that you'll make when you leave here. This is called the 555 Fish Scale Pledge. So I've made 165 of these pins with fish scales on them. You've seen how hard it was to get them. I spared you the details of cleaning fish scales, really gross. And I worked on these because I wanted to give you something, if you wish, to leave here and to be able to follow this sort of journey from winter solstice 2018 to winter solstice 2019. So 5 fish scales, 5 topics, 5 tasks. Each of the 5 topics has 5 tasks to it. There's a Facebook site that I created called the 555 Fish Scale Pledge. If you want to know more about it, grab a fish scale pin, go online, check out all of the details about what I'm talking about. So each of the topics will be First Nations, Matey, Inuit, truth and reconciliation, and you. You're one of the topics. Because I think learning about other people, it's really important to learn about yourself. And I'm going to give you some ideas of what those tasks can be, but you get to choose the tasks. I've chosen the topics, you choose the tasks. And I'll give you some ideas. So we'll talk a bit more about that. But here I want to introduce you to my German grandma. She's my step-grandma, so my stepdad, this is her mom. She passed, his mom. She passed away in May this year. But she was the one who, with a strong German accent, said, I'm not going to do it. I know you were like waiting for me to. Why don't you know how to bead? How come you don't know how to bead? You're native. You should know how to bead. So she took me to a bead store and she said, pick out some beads. So I picked out some beads, but I picked out like a bonsai tree with wire and like 3-point beads. That was not what she had in mind, which was the next slide. She really wanted me to bead like what's in the next slide. Okay, there we go. So this is a Matey jacket. It's gorgeous, it's beautiful. Coming from Germany, and she had this idea of what beading should look like. This is what it was. How much time do I have? 10 minutes. We can do this. So eventually, I taught myself how to bead, but on a loom. My main teacher is Christy Belcourt. So I learned the basics. So what you saw is traditional Métis beadwork, and through my own kind of visual art drawing style, I was able to translate that onto the clothing. So the old tradition of putting artwork and decorating ourselves on our clothes, I've continued, and I put these on mitts with my own style, but clearly Métis beadwork. Here's a couple of examples. This is another pair of mitts that I did. It's kind of an abstract deer for my daughter who has deer in her spirit name. This is a traditional Métis vest, and this is from the Royal Alberta Museum, which we visited in October as well. And this is Baby B, and he's wearing his vest today. He had a welcoming ceremony a few weeks ago, and that is also our tradition, is to welcome all the new babies. We hold them, we look in their eyes, we tell them how much they're loved, we make promises to them, and we do this in front of other people. We had Algonquin elder, or Anishinaabe Algonquin elder Simon Brockpe come over and kind of just guide us along the teachings of this territory. So part of my job, I feel, as a person who's not from this territory, is to learn about what are the traditional protocols of Anishinaabe territory. And so that's why we had Simon Brockpe to guide us along there. That was, just because I'm Indigenous, it doesn't mean I automatically know every Indigenous territory, every Indigenous community, and all the protocols that go along. I still have to respect this land too. So the next slide is Baby B and Grandma Gordon, one of our Métis elders. And the next one is a pair of vamps. So I brought some vamps here that are almost 100 years old. So they have a nice little sign that says, please don't touch. These ones, however, are made because during 2015, Walking with Our Sisters, actually started even before this, is a commemorative installation honoring missing and murdered Indigenous women. So to me, this was very personal for my grandma. I had my own story that is in a publication in 16, I think it came out in Ottawa Magazine. So if you want, you can search for that story. Here's some more beadwork. We like to decorate our artists. We decorate our community, our people, make them feel really strong, make them feel really proud to be Métis. So this is Amanda Rayome, who's from Ottawa, now lives in Toronto. This is a detail of her guitar strap. And this is a belt that I used to decorate our other artists, my children, which are in a group called Prairie Fire. So jigging is a tradition that we have to celebrate because we have to balance with all the ugly out there. We got to make beautiful things. That's why Métis people do flowers. So you can see that flowers is such a big, prominent part of our artwork. And this one was actually purchased by the RCMP. So I'm going to let you think about that, having done the installation for missing and murdered Indigenous women, and what is the role of the RCMP. So the next slide, this is our dance group. Okay? And this is them doing a final sort of celebratory lead out during Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's swearing-in ceremony at the installation ceremony of the Governor General. So you can see that for us, dance is a part of many traditions, and we've learned to incorporate it in some of the Canadian traditions that we have of installation, swearing in. So we do this, and this, I had to quit jigging because I had starting to get abs on the bottom of my feet. I have a six-pack on each side. Okay, you can keep on. This is some of my visual art. Sorry, I love that. So these are some more pictures of the artwork, and in these pictures, we carry on traditional knowledge. So the medicines, each of these plants carries strong medicine. And I draw these on deer skin. This is, yeah, you can keep going. This is one of our elders who are receiving a drum that was purchased by the Crown to give as a gift. So you can see how art is really included in a lot of our Crown Indigenous relations. So black and white, this is a favorite of some, I think. So from ink on deer skin, also have a tradition of tattooing on our bodies, on human skin, on our faces. Some of you may have noticed I have tattoos on my face, and that was like a resurgence of declaring our indigeneity, our connection to the land, my commitment to the land. I need to go back to the community where I showed you. Every time I look in the mirror, I remind myself of my connection to the land. Sacred paint, sacred inks. That's why we put that on our body. It was not looked upon very well for the longest time, and now a lot of people are bringing it back. So this is what it looks like on paper, and so if you go to the next slide, you can see this is what it looks like in color on our arm. Next slide. So from deer skin to human skin to pavement. This is supposed to be on a crosswalk very soon near the Wabano Center, so look out for that. And another tradition we have is of storytelling. For us, the winter time is the time where we tell a lot of our stories about Nanabush or Wasagichak, or a lot of creation stories. So Indigenous Walks is a walk and talk through downtown Ottawa, looking at social, political, and cultural issues through monuments, artwork, landscape, and I said artwork, monuments, landscape, and buildings. That's architecture. Here's a group from Students on Ice that I took, another group. So these happen through request. So people make a request. Okay? And this is my dad in front of the residential school that he went to. It still exists, and his brothers. Now, we're getting close to the end of the talk, so here's the Truth and Reconciliation Commission website, front page, which is one of your topics. So should you commit to this 555 fish scale pledge, here are some ideas for what you could do for each of the topics. The next one, things to do for the fish scale pledge. So remember, 5 tasks. So these are like task-oriented type of things to do. They're not like passive, okay? They're really, go to your boss. Do you have Indigenous awareness training? Why not? Do you think you need it? If you don't, why not? You know, are you working in human resources? You think you don't need it? Actually, that's probably the most important place to have Indigenous awareness. Finance? Absolutely. Why do we pay elders? You know, I have these questions at places that I work at. People don't understand. Bring in an elder to speak. Can you look at your policies? How come at meetings you're not acknowledging Algonquin territory? What are the treaties? How are you implicated? What are some of the complications around the term Métis? Okay, so each of the 5 topics, First Nations, Inuit, Métis, Truth and Reconciliation, and you have 5 concrete tasks. And these are some of the tasks. You know, spend some time talking to a 60s scoop survivor. Spend some time reading on residential school survivors. Next one. So here's some of the pins with the fish scales at the front. Was there another page of topics? Did I miss that switch? Okay, good. So I'll put those on that website, and if you're interested, those are some of your ideas. Now on Facebook, I would love to see your journey. So I read this book. This one is one I really think is important. Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, Clearing the Plains. Like, these are some really monumental books, okay? And I think that's a lot of laughter. This is the last one I really wanted to put this because part of, I wouldn't say a tradition, but just part of who we are as people is, friends supporting one another. And I want to make a mention to my friend Jaime Koebel, who was my roommate at one time as well, who is on his own journey. We're all on our own journeys. His happens to be just nice and like a really good path that he has, and a lot of people follow his path. So Jaime Koebel is over there. He works in the minister's office as well. And so it's nice to have friends to come and support. So make sure that when you're in the community, you find a lot of laughter. And also, it's a time for self-reflection too, because maybe you decide that one of your tasks for, let's say, looking at First Nations issues, you want to go volunteer at Wabano, and you encounter someone who's rude to you. Don't write off that whole experience as really bad, but kind of use it for self-reflection. What happened there? Were they actually rude to me? Was there a part that I play in it? Even if they were, just keep going, because Indigenous issues, especially around terminology, can make people uncomfortable. So if you educate yourself beforehand, before you even start the tasks, so I'll give you some really clear instructions on how to do that, it'll be a bit easier. So finding out, okay, what language am I using? I use Indigenous or use Aboriginal before you even go and volunteer in those spaces. If you want to fundraise, you're an artist and you have an art piece and you want to fundraise for the Odawa Native Friendship Center, do you do it on your own and collect as much funds as possible and then give the funds there? Would you put that in their own Odawa art auction that they have annually and let them auction it off? Before you do anything, if you're planning an event, make sure that you're talking to stakeholders, Indigenous stakeholders. So these are just some ideas that I'd like you to leave here. You have a whole year to do something like this, and I'd love to see your journey of your 5 topics and the 5 tasks that go with it. So I think, do we have time for questions? Sure, we have a couple of minutes for questions. Here's just some details if you want. And a big round of applause, quietly though, like for Baby B, because he might be sleeping. Yay, he's so good. I don't even know where he is. Is he okay? Okay, he's good. Oh, he's out, I think. Oh, yay, he's sleeping. Okay, he's such a good baby. Like all those other bad babies out there. Just kidding, no babies are bad. So, do I have any questions? Questions from anybody?
So we have 2 mics set up on both sides so we can catch the audio in our video as well. So please, if you have a question, feel free to kind of filter into one of these lines, and we can just go like one-to-one.
Hi, Jamie.
Hi.
I brought an offering for you for speaking today. I'm just such a big fan of what you do. Also part of Feminist Twin, so we just
Oh, that's you, great.
Yeah, I really just love the way you decolonize Ottawa, and you do it in such a meaningful way. And I'm also part of Minwashin Lodge. I've been accepting donations, so thank you, CreativeMornings, and all you folks for donating to Minwashin. My question to you is, for folks that aren't card-carrying like Matey, they fit in like the small M, what would you say to them for your advice to try to see where they belong in the world between like kind of Métis, not really Métis, kind of Indigenous, not passing, trying to reclaim that identity and trying to find their way, basically.
Yeah.
And, sorry, it's Sage and Cedar.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. Hi, Eximaga.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Beautiful. So the 2 things that I have is that, first of all, thanks for doing the donation drive to Minwashin Lodge. That's the kind of task I'm talking about, not read the website of Minwashin Lodge. Do the work first, read the website, learn about Indigenous, and then do something, but ask them first if it's okay. So that's a kind of task. So thank you. For the big M, little m, Matey, for those who do the pledge, and one of those colors is the Matey, you're going to find out how complicated the word Matey is. And that would be my task for Matey for you, is to figure that out for yourself. You're like, damn it, that's not the answer I wanted. But I would say, to give you a hint, is that where's your land? Where do you come from? Is it the Red River? Is it northern Alberta, like where I can connect my land from? And who are the people there? Do I actually have Mohawk ancestry? Do I actually have Algonquin ancestry? Maybe I should be talking to First Nation Algonquin people or First Nation Mohawk people. You know, maybe that's where my path is, and it's not Métis at all. So that's my advice. Yeah. Yep. And lastly, if there's no more questions, what are we going to do with these pins after we've completed them? First of all, I'm really interested in hearing your stories about them. So I'm going to be keeping the Facebook page updated. I'm going to be keeping sort of tabs and seeing how your journey's going. But at the end will be kind of a decision on your end how to celebrate the completion of the 5 tasks of the 5 topics. And I'd like to see what kind of tradition, perhaps, you put in place for yourself to carry on and recognize and acknowledge all of that information, that whole journey that you've gone throughout the year. So that's all I have to present. Thanks for coming out this early. I know, to be honest, I would have been like really happy if it was creative noon times, but we made it out here, and I'm just thrilled to be able to come out and share with you our tradition. And please don't call me the fish lady, it's not cool. But I hope you learn a little bit about our traditions today. Hi, thank you, Eximaga. Hey.